Right, welcome to Mrs. Long's video on Dorian Gray, chapter 4. This is the second part. So we're picking up on this quote where Dorian is describing the first time he saw Sybil, or what she looks like. She's the loveliest thing I ever seen in my life. You said to me once that pathos left you unmoved, but beauty, mere beauty, could fill your eyes with tears. I tell you, Harry, I could hardly see this girl for the mist of tears that came across me. And then he describes her beautiful voice. Her lips were like the petals of a rose. Okay, and we know that there's quite a lot of imagery to do with flowers that comes up in the novel. So Dorian is completely taken by Sybil, by her outward beauty, but also her ability to act. She's an incredible little actress as well. He says to Lord Henry, "Your voice and the voice of Sybil Vane are two things I shall never forget. When I close my eyes, I hear them, and each of them says something different." So obviously that's a reference there to the intense influence that both of them have on him. He says that Sybil is everything to me in life. One evening she is Rosalind, the next she's Imogen. And he describes how he's seen her in all sorts of different costumes and all sorts of different characters and all the plays he's seen her in. I've seen her in every age and every costume. Ordinary women never appeal to one's imagination. They are limited to their century. Now, the more astute readers will notice immediately that everything Dorian seems to be referring to with regards to Sybil is things that he can see on the surface. He isn't making any reference to her personality. It's only her acting ability and her beauty, things that we can see on the outside. And then he says, "Oh, why didn't you tell me, Harry, that the only thing worth loving is an actress?" And Henry says, "Oh, I've loved so many of them." And is very dismissive. And so Dorian says, "I wish I had not told you about Sybil Vane." So you can, I suppose, empathize with Dorian here. If you have this wonderful news and you're so excited about something and you share it with somebody and they don't quite share your enthusiasm, getting all tongue-tied. They don't share your enthusiasm. It's almost as if they kind of take you off your excitement a little bit, So you can imagine that Dorian's like, "I wish I hadn't told you." Now, Lord Henry, full of self-importance here, says to Dorian, "You could not have helped telling me, Dorian, all through your life. You will tell me everything that you do." Okay. He knows, and he just absolutely revels in the fact that he has such a hold over Dorian. Dorian says, "Yes, Harry, I believe that's true. I cannot help telling you things. You have a curious influence. If I ever did a crime, I would confess it to you. You would understand me." Lovely little bit of foreshadowing, a lovely parallel to the second last chapter of the book, I think, where Dorian doesn't confess the murder to Lord Henry, but says, "Oh, what if I said it was me?" And again, Lord Henry's so dismissive that Dorian gives up at that point, and Lord Henry says, "Oh, Dorian, you could never do something like that." So when Lord Henry says that he wants to know about Sybil, Dorian describes her as shy and gentle. There's something of a child in her, and she is very young. And one of the important things about Sybil and how we understand her character is that she is very naive and she hasn't had much experience with the world. And when he met her, it's because the Jewish theatre manager, who basically sees Dorian as a walking checkbook, introduced them. And then Sybil has come to call him Prince Charming, because he's like, I suppose, like a knight in shining armor. And this is a very important plot detail because Sybil actually never shares Dorian's real name with anybody, and that becomes a key later on. Dorian goes on to say she knows nothing of life. She lives with her mother, a faded, tired woman who played Lady Capulet and looks as if she's seen better days. And so this is a bit of an insight which we'll get more into in the next chapter, of where Sybil comes from and the kind of unfortunate circumstances in which she lives. Lord Henry expresses a little bit of doubt as to this, and Dorian says he doesn't care where she came from. He only cares about her because she is absolutely and entirely divine. Every night of my life I go to see her act, and every night she is more marvelous. Henry then reprimands him and says, "Oh, is that why you haven't been coming to dinner as often, because you're always at the theatre?" And he asked her, "Dorian, can't you dine with me tonight?" And Dorian says, "No, tonight she's Imogen, and tomorrow night she will be Juliet." Very important little conversation here. "When is she Sybil Vane?" asked Lord Henry. "Never," says Dorian. And so Lord Henry says, "Oh, well, congratulations." Now, it's really important because Dorian doesn't know Sybil Vane. He's in love with her ability to portray all these romantic, mostly Shakespearean actors. But he doesn't actually know the real Sybil. And he says to Henry, "She's more than an individual. She's a genius. I love her, and I must make her love me. You, who know all the secrets of life, tell me how to charm Sybil Vane to love me." Now, it seems that she is completely enamored with him anyway, but Dorian wants to make sure that he gets her to fall in love with him. And Lord Henry, in this little extract, we see Lord Henry watching Dorian with a subtle sense of pleasure. How different he was now from the shy, frightened boy he had met in Basil Hallward's studio. His nature had developed like a flower, floral imagery. And so Dorian then asks Lord Henry if he and Basil will come to the theatre so he can show them this wonder that he's discovered. And he also tells Lord Henry that she is bound to pay a debt to the manager of the theatre. And he plans to sort of repay her debt and then take her to the West End and bring her out properly. So in other words, he's going to present her to the world in a proper theatre, and she will make the world as mad as she has made me. Then we find out that he has been drifting from Basil. He says to Henry, "I've not laid eyes on him in a week. It's rather horrid. He has sent me my portrait in the most wonderful frame, specially designed by himself. And though I'm a little jealous of the picture for being a whole month younger, than I am, I must admit that I delight in it. Perhaps you'd better write to him. I don't want to see him alone. He says things that annoy me. He gives me good advice." So we get a little bit of insight here into why Dorian has perhaps avoided Basil, because Basil says things that are good advice. He acknowledges that, but he doesn't like that. He far prefers Lord Henry, who for the most part tells him what he wants to hear or presents him with ideas that are terrifying but also very, very alluring. So once Lord Henry leaves, Dorian leaves, he contemplates how few people have ever interested him so much as Dorian Gray. Yet the lad's mad adoration of someone else caused him not the slightest pang of annoyance or jealousy. He's pleased by it. It made him a more interesting study. And so you can see here, he almost is taking a scientific approach to Dorian. He's begun by vivisecting himself as he had ended by vivisecting others. He'd always been enthralled by the methods of natural science. He was conscious, and the thought brought a gleam of pleasure into his brown agate eyes, that it was through certain words of his, musical words said with musical utterance, that Dorian Gray's soul had turned to this white girl and bowed in worship before her. To a large extent, the lad was his own creation. Now, I may have mentioned to you before, it's almost as if Lord Henry is living vicariously through Dorian, projecting his own wants and needs into Dorian and delighting at the effect that it has. and almost experiencing life through Dorian all over again. Then he says it doesn't matter how everything ends or was destined to end. He's just going to enjoy seeing how things play out in Dorian's life. The experimental method was the only method by one which could arrive at any scientific analysis of the passions, and Dorian was a subject made to his hand. His sudden mad love for Sybil Vane was a psychological phenomenon of no small interest. So Henry is not so much interested in the relationship as to how it's going to benefit his friend. He's more interested just to see how this plays out, because he knows there's dangers in it. Clearly, Dorian doesn't really understand love. He doesn't understand that he's falling in love with somebody who is below him, and practically it could probably cause him quite a lot of pain. In the future, cause her quite a lot of pain. But to Lord Henry, it's all just this beautiful, dramatic picture, and it's like you would read in the story, and you can't wait to see how it ends up. Then at the end of this chapter, though, I haven't pulled out an extract of that for you, Lord Henry receives a telegram from Dorian saying that he is now engaged to Sybil Vane, and so things have escalated fairly quickly.